Okay, we're going to, since we don't have our copies of the paper today for figurative language, we are going to stop or notice what we can see so far today, and then we can go back if necessary on our paper to add them. Okay? Okay. The Tiger Rising by Kate D. Camillo. Chapter 1. Nope. There we go. The morning after he discovered the tiger, Rob went and stood under the Kentucky Star Motel sign and waited for the school bus like it was any other day. The Kentucky Star sign was composed of a yellow neon star that rose and fell over a piece of blue neon in the shape of the state of Kentucky. Rob liked the sign. He harbored a dim but abiding notion that it would bring him good luck. Okay. I do want to remind you, in this book, if you're not paying attention, you will be lost. Okay, so put your pencils down now and just look at the story and just listen to me. Finding the tiger had been luck. He knew that. He had been out in the woods behind the Kentucky Star Motel, way out in the woods, not really looking for anything, just wandering, hoping that maybe he would get lost or get eaten by a bear and not have to go to school ever again. That's when he saw the old Beauchamp gas station building, all boarded up and tumbling down. Next to it, there was a cage, and inside the cage, unbelievably, there was a tiger. A real-life, very large tiger pacing back and forth. He was orange and gold and so bright, it was like staring at the sun itself, angry and trapped in a cage. Imagery. Simile. It was like staring at the sun itself. Orange and gold, so bright. Okay, that's all figurative language right there. It was early morning, and it looked like it might rain. It had been raining every day for almost 2 weeks. The sky was gray, and the air was thick and still. Fog was hugging the ground. To Rob, it seemed as if the tiger was some magic trick, rising out of the mist. He was so astounded at his discovery, so amazed, that he stood and stared, but only for a minute. He was afraid to look at the tiger for too long, afraid that the tiger would disappear. He stared, and then he turned and ran back into the woods, toward the Kentucky Star. And the whole way home, while his brain doubted what he had seen, his heart beat out the truth to him. Tiger, tiger, tiger. That was what Rob thought about as he stood beneath the Kentucky Star sign and waited for the bus. The tiger. He did not think about the rash on his legs, the itchy red blisters that snaked their way into his shoes. His father said that it would be less likely to itch if he didn't think about it. And he did not think about his mother. He hadn't thought about her since the morning of the funeral, the morning he couldn't stop crying, the great heaving sobs that made his chest and stomach hurt. His father, watching him, standing beside him, had started to cry too. They were both dressed up in suits that day. His father's suit was too small, and when he slapped Rob to make him stop crying, he ripped a hole underneath the arm of his jacket. There ain't no point in crying, his father had said afterward. Crying ain't gonna bring her back. It had been 6 months since that day. 6 months since he and his father had moved from Jacksonville to Lister. And Rob had not cried since, not once. The final thing he did not think about that morning was getting on the bus. He specifically did not think about Norton and Billy Threemonger waiting for him like chained, starved guard dogs eager to attack. Waiting for him like chained, starved guard dogs. What is it? Simile. But it gives you a really good picture, right? Rob had a way of not thinking about things. He imagined himself as a suitcase that was too full, like the one that he had packed when they left Jacksonville after the funeral. He made all his feelings go inside that suitcase. He stuffed them in tight and then sat on the suitcase to lock it shut. Is it a real suitcase?
No.
It is not a real suitcase. That's why we need to pay attention. Yeah, it's his feelings. That was the way he not thought about things. Sometimes it was hard to keep the suitcase shut, but now he had something to put on top of it. The tiger. Literally,
No.
Is he going to put the tiger on top of his suitcase?
No.
No. He has something else to consume his thoughts of his emotions that he doesn't want to let out of the suitcase. So I'm saying you really got to follow along. This is like an older kid book. You got to pay attention. So as he waited for the bus under the Kentucky Star sign, and as the first drops of rain fell from the sullen sky, that was the other word we didn't write down, like the dark, kind of dim, Rob imagined the tiger on top of his suitcase, blinking his golden eyes, sitting proud and strong, unaffected by all the not thoughts inside straining to come out. Okay, so far here's what we know about Rob. He lost his mom. He lives with his dad. They moved from Jacksonville to Lister, which is in Florida. Where does he live? Like, what does he live in? What does he live in, Ureli?
A motel.
A motel. A motel called the Kentucky Star. Okay, even though he lives in Florida, it's called the Kentucky Star Motel. And he does not like to think about his emotions. He does not like to let them out. And he has this way of not thinking about things. Okay, so maybe it's kind of changed him, okay, the things that he's gone through so far in his life. Chapter 2. "Looky here," said Norton Threemonger as soon as Rob stepped onto the school bus. "It's the Kentucky Star. How's it feel to be a star?" Norton stood in the center of the aisle, blocking Rob's path. Rob shrugged. "Oh, he don't know," Norton called to his brother. "Hey, Billy, he don't know what it's like to be a star." Rob slipped past Norton. He walked all the way to the back of the bus and sat down in the last seat. "Hey," said Billy Threemonger, "you know what? This ain't Kentucky. This is Florida." So they're making fun of him living in the motel called Kentucky Star. He followed Rob and sat down right next to him. He pushed his face so close that Rob could smell his breath. It was bad breath. It smelled metallic and rotten. "You ain't a Kentucky Star," Billy said, his eyes glowing under the brim of his John Deere cap. "And you sure ain't a star here in Florida. You ain't a star nowhere." "Okay," Rob said. Billy shoved him hard, and then Norton came swaggering back, leaned over Billy, and grabbed a hold of Rob's hair with one hand, and with the other hand ground his knuckles into Rob's scalp. Okay, Norton and Billy are...
Bullies.
Rob sat there and took it. If he fought back, it lasted longer. And if he didn't fight back, sometimes they got bored and left him alone. They were the only 3 kids on the bus until it got into town. And Mr. Nelson, the driver, pretended like he didn't know what was going on. He drove, staring straight ahead, whistling songs that didn't even have melody. Rob was on his own, and he knew it. "He's got the creeping crud all over him," said Billy. He pointed at Rob's legs. "Look," he said to Norton. "Ain't it gross?" "Uh-huh," said Norton. He was concentrating on grinding his knuckles into Rob's head. It hurt, but Rob didn't cry. He never cried. He was a pro at not crying. He was the best not crier in the world. It drove Norton and Billy Threemonger wild. And today, Rob had the extra power of the tiger. All he had to do was think about it, and he knew there was no way he would cry. Not ever. They were still out in the country, only halfway into town, when the bus lurched to a stop. This was such a surprising development, to have the bus stop halfway through its route, that Norton stopped grinding his knuckles into Rob's scalp, and Billy stopped punching Rob in the arm. "Hey, Mr. Nelson," Norton shouted. "What you doing?" "This ain't a stop, Mr. Nelson," Billy called out helpfully. But Mr. Nelson ignored them. He kept whistling his non-song as he swung open the bus door, and while Norton and Billy and Rob watched, open-mouthed and silent, a girl with yellow hair and a pink lacy dress walked up the steps and on to the bus. Chapter 3. Nobody wore pink lacy dresses to school. Nobody. Even Rob knew that. He held his breath as he watched the girl walk down the aisle of the bus. Here was somebody even stranger than he was sure. "Hey," Norton called, "this is a school bus." "I know it," said the girl. Her voice was gravelly and deep, and the words sounded clipped and strange, like she was stamping each one of them out with a cookie cutter. Figurative language. "You're all dressed up to go to a party," Billy said. "This ain't the party bus." He elbowed Rob in the ribs. "Huh," Norton laughed. He gave Rob a friendly thud on the head. The girl stood in the center of the aisle, swaying with the movement of the bus. She stared at them. not my fault you don't have good clothes, she said finally. She sat down and put her back to them. Hey, said Norton. We're sorry. We didn't mean nothing. Hey, he said. What's your name? The girl turned and looked at them. She had a sharp nose and a sharp chin and black eyes. Sistine, she said. Sistine? Hooted Billy. What kind of stupid name is that? Like the chapel, she said slowly, making each word clear and strong. Rob stared at her, amazed. What are you looking at? She said to him. Rob shook his head. Yeah, said Norton. He cuffed Rob on the ear. What are you staring at, diseased boy? Come on, he said to Billy. And together they swaggered up the aisle of the bus and sat in the seat behind the new girl. They whispered things to her, but Rob couldn't hear what they were saying. He thought about the Sistine Chapel. He had seen a picture of it in the art book that Mrs. Dupree kept on the small shelf behind her desk in the library. The pages of the book were slick and shiny, and each picture made Rob feel cool and sweet inside, like a drink of water on a hot day. Figurative language. Mrs. Dupree let Rob look at the book because he was quiet and good in the library. It was her reward to him. In the book, the picture from the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel showed God reaching out and touching Adam. It was like they were playing a game of tag, like God was making Adam it. It was a beautiful picture. So this is a real painting, like the Sistine Chapel. Rob looked out the window at the gray rain and the gray sky and the gray highway. He thought about the tiger. He thought about God and Adam, and he thought about Sistine. He did not think about the rash. He did not think about his mother, and he did not think about Norton and Billy Threemonger. He kept the suitcase closed. Chapter 4. Sistine was in Rob's 6th grade homeroom class. Mrs. Soames made her stand up and introduce herself. My name, she said in her gravelly voice, is Sistine Bailey. She stood at the front of the room in her pink dress. All the kids stared at her with open mouths, as if she had just stepped off a spaceship from another planet. Figurative language. Rob looked down at his desk. He knew not to stare at her. He started working on a drawing of the tiger. What a lovely name, said Mrs. Soames. Thank you, said Sistine. Patrice Wilkins, who sat in front of Rob, snorted and then giggled and then covered her mouth. I'm from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Sistine said, home of the Liberty Bell, and I hate the South because the people in it are ignorant. Stupid. And I'm not staying here in Lister. My father's coming to get me next week. She looked around the room defiantly. She's just looking around. Well, said Mrs. Soames, thank you very much for introducing yourself, Sistine Bailey. You may take your seat before you put your foot in your mouth any farther. The whole class laughed at that. Like pretty much it's like, you shouldn't have said what you just said, so put your foot in your mouth. That's an idiom. The whole class laughed at that. Rob looked up just as Sistine sat down. She glared at him, and then she stuck her tongue out at him. Him! He shook his head and went back to his drawing. He sketched out the tiger, but what he wanted to do was whittle it in wood. His mother had shown him how to whittle, how to take a piece of wood and make it come alive. She taught him when she was sick. He sat on the edge of the bed and watched her tiny white hands closely. Don't jiggle that bed, his father said. Your mama's in a lot of pain. The mom was sick with cancer, and Dad said not to do that. He ain't hurting me, Robert, his mother said. Don't get all tired out with that wood, his father said. It's all right, his mother said. I'm just teaching Rob some things I know. But she said she didn't have to teach him much. His mother told him he already knew what to do. His hands knew. That's what she said. Rob, said the teacher, I need you to go to the principal's office. So this was all kind of like, he was just kind of daydreaming for a minute. They're still at school. Rob didn't hear her. He was working on the tiger, trying to remember what his eyes looked like. Robert, Mrs. Soames said. Robert Horton. Rob looked up. Robert was his father's name. Robert was what his mother had called his father. Mr. Fellmer wants to see you in his office. Do you understand? Yes, ma'am, said Rob. He got up and took his picture of the tiger and folded it up and put it in the back pocket of his shorts. On his way out of the classroom, Jason Uppmeyer tripped him and said, see you later, and that's the retard word. See you later, retard. And Sistine looked up at him with her tiny black eyes. She shot him a look of pure hate. Okay, that's page 13.